everybody. This is Echoes of War. I'm Craig from the Pacific War Channel, joined here today by my usual co-host, Garav. How are you?
Hey Craig, great to be back. And this is one episode I've been excited to cover for a long, long time.
And it's going to be a triple threat match because Garav has invited one of his friends who's a history enthusiast. Victor, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Today we'll be diving into a Game of Thrones-esque scenario here.
Definitely. And it's one I really don't know much about. I briefly had to do some research, and I can say it is pretty batshit crazy. But before we jump into it, I just want to say if you want to further support the channel, please think about checking out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. You join either, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. And again, the latest episode was it's kind of a wacky one. It's a alternate history episode, a multi-part series for the Pacific War. So the first episode's titled "The Great Naval Battle of Pearl Harbor," and for all of you alternate history hub fans, it's going to meet your every desire. So I do recommend checking it
Husband
out.
Kimmel, Husband Kimmel leading the United States Pacific Fleet.
Uh, I don't
I'm
want to
just
give
kidding.
away. I don't want to give away anything, but
All right.
the whole episode is bound by a quote by Nimitz in 53 when he was interviewed about what could have happened under Husband Kimmel. And it provided everything I needed. It's pretty funny.
All right.
So, anyways, but Garov is going to be leading this one. So, Garov, please take us into what.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't even say the subject matter. Oh, wait, we did.
Let
Okay,
me just take over.
go for it.
Sure. Just let me know if the screen's visible because for the audience, we have a YouTube component. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
are going to be flashing images, maps where all possible. So
It's a good choice of
if
an
you're
image, by the
listening
way.
on, thank you.
And
So if
yeah,
you,
just
when
to say to
it
the
comes to YouTube,
audience, just to
yeah.
say to the audience, yeah, I'll explain. Most of you are obviously listening on audio podcast platforms. I know that because I can see the algorithm all the time. Please consider watching us on YouTube because we provide maps, portraits, you name it. It really helps when you don't know the geography. And Garov, take us away.
Sure. So just a brief intro. This is one of my most favorite periods of Roman history. It's famously called the Year of the Four Emperors, which was the first civil war experienced by the Romans in the Empire times, marked the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and it's quite an eventful event with four pretenders to the throne and one emerging victorious. So we need to set the background first on how it created like the smell pot or events to come through. So, Victor, maybe you could talk to us about the reign of Emperor Nero, since that is going to set the context for what's about to come.
Absolutely. So at this stage, the empire was still in its infancy, and it's called the Principate. So it's still nominally a republic in name, but Augustus, he played this very convoluted political game where he balanced the interests of the Senate and the people and his key supporters, the like the military, and so he would do these elaborate theatrics. He would pretend to resign so the Senate would beg him to come back and all that stuff. But he set a precedent for, this is how the emperor, the princeps, is supposed to rule. And the problem is that it's only he who could live up to that ideal. No one else could carefully balance all these factors against each other. And so it was still nominally a republic, and you had this balancing act between different factions. You had the emperor and the imperial family, the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and then you had the senators, and they were the traditional elites of Rome, and they expected to be treated favorably. And then you had the equites, who will become relevant later on, but they were still elite, wealthy, but they weren't patricians. Equite means horsemen, and this is sometimes translated as knights, which I think is pretty misleading. So we will call them the equestrians or equites then. And then you have the citizens, and you have freemen, and these will become relevant too. But then you have Nero. So Nero, inherits the throne from Claudius after his mother may or may not have poisoned Claudius to put him on the throne as a puppet. So he started out as a
Wouldn't be
puppet.
wouldn't be the
Sorry.
first time in the Julio-Claudian dynasty where a woman of the imperial family poisoned someone to get them
Yeah,
to get the competition out of the way.
yeah.
My
And
poor Germanicus.
she really had no other way to influence the state other than through her male relatives. So this was all she had, I suppose. But she wanted a puppet, I guess, on the throne. But she also appointed Seneca, the elder, I think, and Pyrrhus to rule. To rule in his stead as well. But they turned against her. They turned Nero against her, which would eventually lead to him murdering his own mother. Which is it gets crazier. But in his early reign, Nero was living the I guess the billionaire son's lifestyle, right? He had no responsibilities. He could do whatever he wanted. So obviously, when you have all the money in the world, all the free time in the world, you can do whatever you want. He turned out to be a bit of a playboy. He had this lavish lifestyle, but he also was quite the admirer of Greek culture, and this is called Philhellenism. But there was some tension there because the Romans they looked down on the Greeks a bit at the same time while they admired them. I guess they saw it as a bit unmanly, in quotes, because they were more artistic, more softer like that, where the Romans were austere and more like, I guess, a Spartan kind of lifestyle then. But Nero devoted himself a lot to art, artistic pursuits, including plays. So he would take roles, and keep in mind, the Romans looked down on actors. It was a very low status profession, especially since he took on some devious roles. And so his status was associated with the low status of the roles he played, as well as the profession in general, I suppose. And so, but he started out fairly popular, and then it all went downhill from there. So obviously he did not play this game that I talked about earlier, that Augustus established. So he alienated key supporters, pretty much everyone. I don't think that anyone by the end still supported him. But you have widespread provincial revolts like Boudica, for example, which was an absolute disaster. Almost destroyed their presence on Britain completely. And you have others that will become relevant later under Vespasian.
But I'll just add that we covered Boudica's revolt in our Battle of Watling Street episode.
Yes.
And what he said is true. Until the news of Paulinus's great victory at Watling Street reached Rome, Nero was really considering to pull out of the province completely.
Yes.
Keep in mind, it was his predecessor that invaded to get his legitimacy as an emperor.
I think this also would sorry.
Yeah, and one more thing is the administration of Nero's first half of his reign was considered a role model, especially with the way he handled administration of the tax collectors. Even the Emperor Trajan also referred to it as a gold standard. But as you said, after the death of his mother, things started to go downhill because the woman he wanted to marry was related to one of our pretenders.
Oh, right. Maybe I should have mentioned that. Yeah, but it wasn't really his administration as much as it was Seneca the elder who pretty much handled everything, and they would come to him with, "Oh, you need to sign this. This person needs to be executed, or these taxes need to be implemented." But he was fairly. I would say he strikes me as someone who was very sensitive. He seems to have disliked executing people, surprisingly enough, at the start. Although this is kind of strange since he murdered his own mother. This is quite the character here. we're dealing with. But yeah, early on, his reign went fairly well. He was quite popular. Everything went smoothly, and then he turned on Seneca, for example. He turned on his mother and everyone, and he really did not seem fit to be emperor, because there are rumors that he wanted to abandon the role entirely and devote himself to music and arts. But so he neglects his imperial duties, I suppose. And there's a great fire in Rome, quite famous one. And there are rumors that he was involved, although these are
Just one
quite
moment.
unsubstantiated.
Just would like to share some, just like the bust of Nero, and it did have the pictures of the Great Fire, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And there is this
You
myth.
have to
which
show the
was
bust with the reconfiguration of what he looked like, because oh my God,
Sure.
Nero.
with the neck beard there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ginger neck beard.
Oof.
But that's a beard, man. That's beard.
I think
But
he popularized beards again. They came back in style when he became emperor.
Yeah, it's very Greek.
But he would have these strange phases where he took on the life as an ascetic in Greece. So he would travel like a prophet or something, like some great philosopher in like rags, basically. And he would let his hair grow out and stuff. But this rumor, then back to this rumor, it's quite unsubstantiated. He was in a villa or something when it happened. Although I suppose he could have made someone else burn it for him. But it's quite the evidence is quite weak. But people still believed it at the time.
Basically,
which
I think it was supposed to burn down the city to create his own vision of Rome.
Yeah, he wanted to. The idea was, but the rumors were that he was responsible, and he had personally wanted to burn it down so that he could rebuild it in his own vision. And he liked Greek culture a lot, so it would be more Greek style. And he also wanted to apparently build a palace, called the Domus Aurea, the golden house, or golden mansion is more appropriate, which would have covered a third of Rome. But he probably wasn't behind the fires. But then there's a rumor that he blamed the Christians, used them as a scapegoat. And here we go to his quite poor reputation among Christians, as he is considered one of the first to quite thoroughly persecute the Christians. And it is said that the beast in the book of Revelation is as an allegory for Nero, as the mark of the beast in some practice called gematria in Greek. It's when letters are assigned a numerical value and then you combine them, and it's very convoluted. But it adds up to 666, according to the most widespread interpretation of this number. Then, but it's not a certainty, but it's not entirely implausible either. But he was despised by the Christians, and he was quite popular against with everyone. So in the end, everyone turned against him, and he had to commit suicide because he was going to die. Someone else had proclaimed himself
I would
emperor.
just say what happened was, after the Great Fire, he needed to refund the construction of the city. So he raised the taxes, especially against the provinces, quite substantially. And this caused a lot of resentment across all the provinces. And at the same time, just slightly after the fire, sad, is there was a conspiracy against Nero. It's called led by Gaius Calpurnius Piso, who wanted to usurp him and return Rome to a republic. It was uncovered with the help of a freedman, and Nero executes all the conspirators. Like how the Catalan conspiracy went in the Republic days. And it was at this time that Seneca, who was like the shadow advisor or shadow ruler in a way, he was forced to commit suicide. Anyways, he had fallen out of Nero's grace. And now this is the biased statement also, where he lost popularity with the people as well, because he kicked Poppaea, his wife, during childbirth of their second child. And now this is what the primary sources claim, but modern historians think she just died in childbirth, which was pretty common at that time. And he kind of like started to build his great funeral for her and such. Now, what starts off in the year of the four emperors is in March 68, Gaius Julius Vindex, he's the governor of one of the Gallic provinces, he rebels against Nero. He doesn't, and this is only down to the taxation policy, which led to the resentment and him declaring arms. And he wanted to gain support from outside of his own province, as Lucius Verginius Rufus, who was at that time the governor of Germania Superior, that is the southern German province in Roman terms, had come to put down the revolt. Vindex calls upon Galba, who is the governor in Hispania at the time, to join the rebellion and declare himself emperor. Why did Vindex not take the throne for himself? He was quite aware of his very humble origins and knew it would lack a lot of legitimacy issues.
You know what? You know what his background was? Class background.
Vindex?
Yes. So, equity.
No, I think the problem was his family was given citizenship or such only after Caesar's Gallic conquests.
Oh.
So they don't have that much of a history. So even though they were a Gallic noble family, undoubtedly, for him to even reach the station of being a provincial governor, it's not a Roman family or even an Italian family for that matter. Now, he does lead the first rebellion against, Nero. Now, interestingly, the Vergilius, the governor of Germania Superior, and him actually decide to meet and support Galba's bid, but it results actually in a battle taking place, and that is the Battle of sorry, one moment, just got confused. The Battle of Vesontio, which is at the capital of the Vindex's province. The reason was the soldiers of the Germanic legions refused to want to work for Galba, because when he was the governor of that province, he was quite a disciplinarian. They did not want to serve under him.
Yes.
And ultimately, we have that it's around this time when Galba does agree to, take the throne and raises another legion. So Hispania, I think why I'm talking about the legion is, let me just share my screen briefly for a moment again. There was this entire image I had of sorry, I think I forgot to get that image up. So the province of Hispania had around one legion at most. This is one of the safer areas of the empire, as you can see here. So he raises a second legion within Carthage, and then they march down into Italy. Now, Galba's march is not without mayhem. All the towns that do not immediately swear allegiance to him, there are a lot of massacres and atrocities committed to all these towns as he marches down to Rome. And at the same time, Nero is declared a public enemy in 9th or 10th June, year 68. It's where he flees Rome and tries to kill himself, with no one willing to help him except for a slave. And then some cavalrymen of the Senate find him, and he's supposed to be wanting to die. There are multiple different portrayals of how he is dead. Now, when Galba is marching down on, Rome, Nero had been betrayed by a very important prefect of the Praetorian Guard, Gaius Nymphidius Sabinus. Sorry. Now, the Praetorian Guard, as Greg, when we go into the rest of the Roman Empire, are going to be big power brokers for the audience. Even though they're supposed to be loyal to the emperor, they are loyal to the money or whoever they want. Sabinus actually convinced the Praetorians that let's murder Nero, we'll back Galba, and he promised that Galba will pay each of us 30,000 sesterces, which is about 10 years of wages. Quite a lucrative offer, if you would ask me.
And this is a key promise he makes.
It is.
And Galba's bid for power is contingent on this promise, which may or may not be honored.
Yeah. So we have the situation where these men are promised this, and unfortunately for the men, Galba has no intention of fulfilling this promise.
I was gonna say it's one. I don't know the story, but I'm imagining it's one of those situations where you have your conspirators and you say you're gonna pay them, and you just kill them off. Like,
I believe Galba and Sabinus were not co-conspirators. Like, he worked with Vindex, and he would also be an emperor that, like any ruler throughout time, would put his key allies in key positions. But Sabinus was not. And the funny thing that actually does happen is Sabinus, when he realizes Galba is not willing to play ball with him to meet his demands, he decides to declare for himself as the emperor. And he wanted to claim that he was an illegitimate son of the horse is my senate and I'm the victor against the war of Neptune, Caligula. Yes. So that was going to be his claim to the imperial throne. And, well, unfortunately, the Praetorians decided that it's better to back Galba and not this guy, and they killed him before, Galba's forces marched into Rome.
I think it's interesting how he tries to legitimize his claim there by claiming that to be an illegitimate son of Caligula was part of the imperial family, and after Nero, there is no one in the imperial family who is a serious contender for the throne.
You do need to have that Julia Claudian claims for now, given the prestige of the family.
But then you have this Galba here, who isn't part of the imperial family, but he comes from an extremely prestigious family, senatorial family, and he has had an illustrious career.
It is. So just a little bit of Galba I could just add is he was a praetor in the year 30, which would have put him 33 years old. So one of the younger praetors, given the age was about 37, 38, ideally for the cursus honorum, the path of. And he would, in the years 39 to 41, under Caligula's blessings, be the governor of Germania, where he was a staunch disciplinarian, very harsh with his men, which is why he earned the eternal animosity of the Germanic legionaries. And when he becomes emperor and gets rid of Sabinus, when he arrives at Rome, with Marcus Silvio Otho was, who was a Galba supporter. They're attacked by one legion that had been, raised by Nero. This was the first legion, or as it was called, it was Legio I Adruitix. So when he marches down, there is a lot of massacres, as I mentioned. And he reaches Rome in the first half of October. So this is about 2.5 months since he had been declared emperor. And the funny thing is about this legion that Nero had created, the first legion, they were not legionaries. They were created from Marines of the Roman Navy. But they did distinguish themselves quite well. And they were murdered and, in the massacre. And Galba only pardoned them when he asked the survivors to decimate themselves.
Very, very lenient emperor there. But that's so in character for him, because he is
It is
extremely principled, but also sort of imagine him like a Ned Stark almost, but I guess more severe, more violent than, because he refuses to play this game. He refuses to pay the Praetorians what was promised, even though he might not have
and
promised
that
himself. Yeah.
No, but they expected him to fulfill the promise that was made. That is the issue.
It was certainly in his interest, political interest, to do so, but he refuses. And it seems to me it was out of principle. And he seems to have this very aristocratic mindset that people should just fall in line and adhere to, rules and such. But that's not really how people worked, and he alienated pretty much everyone except for the Senate, it seems, because they were the ones to proclaim him emperor. And he was one of them for now.
And when he reaches Rome after the massacres on his march on Rome, he continues a typical practice of having people that he trusted move into provinces of power or positions of power. So we have Marcus Horrendus Flaccus, who was old and disabled, sent to Germania Superior, and Aulus Vitellius is sent to Germania Inferior, who was respected by not respected by most senators except for Galba, but he backed him, so that was good enough for him to secure a very powerful position. And
I'm sure this character will not reappear later on.
Indeed. But as you said, he's a man of principle and a staunch disciplinarian. He does not pay the Praetorians, which has really pissed him off. And he even turned against some former supporters. There was a Roman quaestor, Aulus Aelianus, who sent money in his possession when Galba rebelled. So with this and the 20-year plus sentiment that had been brewing in Germania's legions, and the way he marched down to Rome, his rule unraveled on the 1st of June, year 69. So the symbolism is every legion in the empire swears its loyalty to the emperor or principes, as they are also a consul, which is what you're supposed to do, so that you're promising your loyalty to the state. The Germanic legions refused to swear obedience. And very shortly after, the 4th and 18th legions, they demanded a new emperor from Germania Superior, and the legions of Germania Inferior declared for Vitalius. And it is at that time that Galba started to worry, because he knew he needed to secure his grip on power. But he adopted a young senator, Calpurnius Piso Lucianus, as the successors. And the most important person he offended in this was Marcus Salvius Otho. He was a very influential senator, as he wanted the title of imperator for himself. At that time, Otho was the governor of what we would call Portugal today, and he marched with Galba. So he bribes the Praetorian guards and actually pays them money. So they actually got some coin in their pocket this time.
So he's basically earned their favor.
Indeed.
Oh.
And I don't think, given their discontentment, he did not have to bribe them significantly. And when Galba heard of this coup, he went into the streets to stabilize the situation, and nobody came to his aid. And in the Roman Forum, he and Licinius, his successor that he adopted, were killed, and their heads were impaled on poles. Kind of mini Vlad the Impaler.
Kind of like Ned Stark. I have a
And
quote from Tacitus
Mhm.
that I think pretty much summarizes Galba. It was everyone's opinion that he was capable of ruling the empire had he never ruled. End quote. And I think that summarizes him. He just was not suited for the job, and um, he would have
and
been better off as a governor or general.
and I think there was also one quote which Suetonius also put about Galba, which was his appointment of Aulus Vitellius as the provincial governor. The emperors, while they rewarded their loyal supporters, they were also pretty aware of who they could send or not. Vitellius was known to be a glutton and an enjoyer of life, but horrible with management. Not really, even with you account for the usual corruption that governors show, someone you would ever want to send to any province, let alone a province like Germania, which is garrisoned by many, many Roman legionaries. And this, I think, is supremely important because the Romans, when they garrison provinces, if it was a stable province, that area is not going to have too many legions. They don't need it. Italy was never had any legions. Most of North Africa had one entire legion. The entire Iberian Peninsula and Gaul together had one or two legions. But along this, and Alexandria and Egypt also had one or two legions. But around in Pannonia, Dalmatia, Illyria, Dalmatia, along the Rhine, and along the eastern borders in Asia Minor, these three regions, they had the crack forces of the Roman soldiers, because this is where they would be fighting against multiple barbarian invasions, or if you're in the east, fighting against the powerful Parthians and Sassanid empires.
Yes.
So they require this is where the crack troops are. And at this particular time in the first century AD, it is the German legions that are considered the best.
Yes, and you have these battle-hardened veterans, all concentrated, hyper alert all the time, and highly prepared for combat, very well trained. And you send someone there, and he wins their favor, and now he has the most powerful army in the entire empire.
Indeed. So the day Galba is murdered, Otho is declared as emperor by the Senate. Now, this is a problem because Vitalius has already begun his march down to Rome with the German legions. Otho, in a mad scrambles, as we can see the bust here, starts to rally whatever support that he can get from wherever he could. Now, one thing is, Otho was ambitious, but I think I would just say he could have proven to be a pretty competent emperor because he was no more corrupt. He did not have any tyrannical streak. He just was ambitious, but
I agree.
never was. But unfortunately for him, as we said, the powerful legions of Vitellius have already begun marching down, and this includes the 21st Rapax Legion and the 5th Aladoi Legion. So his first tasks as emperor is actually to combat Vitellius. So Otho with the Praetorian guards, he moves up and starts to gather whatever forces he can. Because Vitellius, if you include all his legions and auxiliaries, including the very powerful and capable Batavian cavalry, has amassed an army of over 70,000. Now, Otto leaves Rome on the 14th of March, and he moves north. He leaves his brother Titanius in charge of Rome, and he first decides to camp out in the city of Brixelium, which is in the modern day province of Reggio Emilia in northern Italy. Now, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact provinces of Italy, but it's towards the north. And this is going to be his base of operation. So his current force includes the now reconstituted Legio 1 Adruitix, Legio 13 Gebina, and a vexillatium of the 14th Legion Gemina, the heroes of Watling Street. So these guys are fighting. And while the German legions were the most formidable as a whole, the best known and most competent legion at this time in the entire empire was the 14th Legion, the victors of Watling Street. And he has the Praetorian Guard and a force of gladiators. He did also have a very capable commander. We had General Suetonius, the Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, the victor of Watling Street, who did also secure Britain not only before Boudicca's revolt, but after as well. He was there and willing to fight for him. But Otho did not trust him, it seems. He actually recalls his brother from Rome to take supreme command of the armies of his. Now, there was several smaller skirmishes, and there was actually like an ambush set up by the Othonian forces led by Paulinus, which caused supporters of Vitellius led by Aulus Cassius Aelianus to retreat. However, unfortunately for the Othonians, they could not completely destroy this force, and more Vitellian legions have joined him. So, and it's around this time Titanius takes over command of the armies, and they go to the city of Cremona to give battle. And this is in spite of the advice not only provided by Paulinus, but several other key generals on this command staff. They don't want to engage right now. There are still legions very loyal to him, while he has only 2 legions here and a vexillatio. The legions in Pannonia and Dalmatia have already declared for Otho and have commenced their march into Italy. So they wanted to wait. They wanted to play defensive and get these superiority numbers, and then they can throw back the Vitalian forces. But Titanius and Otho are eager for battle. And on the 14th of April, they meet near the town of Cremona on the Via Postumia. And this is where it's a slaughterhouse for both sides. The Othonian forces fight well, but are already exhausted from a much longer march that they had to take to get to the battle. And some of the most ferocious fighting was between Legio 1 Adruitix, which were these former Marines from the Roman Navy that were constituted as a legion by Nero. And they clashed with the elite 21st Rapax division. And that Marine legion did pretty well. They even captured the Aquila of the 21st for a bit. But they did suffer heavy casualties as the pretty pissed off Rapax legionaries rushed forward to secure back the Aquila. Elsewhere, the 13th Legion was defeated by the 5th Legion. And the decisive moment came when the Batavian cavalry charged on the flanks and destroyed the integrity of Othonian forces. This is where you could say the battle ended and the rout of Otho's armies began. It was a pretty brutal fight, which according to Cassius Dio, over 40,000 were killed on both sides. You could put the estimated strength of each army, if you include their auxiliary forces, well north of 45,000 at least. The Othonian troops flee back to the camps in Bedriacum, and then the next day they do surrender to Vitalius, and the survivors swear their loyalty. When the news of the defeat is got to Brixelium, which is a city slightly farther away where Otho is based, many of the soldiers there and all the senior staff tell Otho, don't worry, don't abdicate, don't give up. We have heavy reinforcements on our way. You got to stay in the fight. And Otho actually does choose to commit suicide at this point, hoping that he is going to, prevent more deaths than necessary, and takes his own life. And Vitellius would, continue his march and would enter Rome, where he's made the emperor. Now, between the two, for Galba and Otho, we've had two of our four emperors take the throne and vacated over 7 months, and now we are on to our third emperor.
Who's notably
Now,
really hedonistic, isn't he? This guy was kind of like a live it up.
glutton.
Yeah, I was going to say he's very lucky he was given the position he was given to have those dramatic forces because he doesn't seem, from
Yeah.
my point of view, like he's made to be emperor. No, he doesn't have the material.
So, I think I've accidentally deleted his bust.
He knew his cards and he played them well. Had he not had those legions, he probably never would have even come close to the throne.
Even Suetonius actually questioned, because Vitalius was given provincial command by Galba owing to their many years of friendship.
So yeah, this is a artistic rendition of him, I believe.
Yes, I remember reading Suetonius like almost 10 years ago, and the only thing I remember from about Vitalius was that he liked to eat, so to speak. That's the only thing I remember about him.
And I think, just quoting about the appointment of Vitalius to Germania Inferior, in the words of Suetonius, Galba surprised everybody by sending him to Lower Germany. Some think that it was due to Titus Vinius, who had great influence at the time and whose friendship with Vitalius had long since won through the common support of the Blues. But since Galba openly declared that no men were less to be feared than those who thought nothing but eating, that Vitalius's bottomless cruet might be filled from the resources of the province, it is clear to anyone that he was chosen rather through contempt than favor. Now, why would you give a guy like him command of veteran legions who already hate you, Galba? Use your brain. You might be a man of principle, but you certainly were not a man of intellect.
But that's very much in line with Galba's character. He is so full of himself because he's from the superior lineage and all that. But he can't even fathom that Vitalius would, turn against Rome because he's a glutton.
And I think it's not only that, but I think he definitely more underestimated that the fact that the legionaries and legions stationed there, they still harbored great resentment against him. So it's quite easy for the two forces to converge because they have a common objective in getting rid of him. Now, Vitalius's reign, oh boy, that's all I can say.
Yeah, a brief description would be that he let his own personal pleasures get in the way of actually being emperor, it would seem.
Okay, I'll just say he was not totally bad, like 90% bad. There were a couple of important contributions he did make, which also outlined them, which Tacitus also said, were there. One, Vitellius entered the practice of centurions selling furloughs and exemptions of duty to their men. And it was a change that all the good emperors of Rome would adopt. So you got to give him that. And he also expanded the offices of the imperial administration beyond the imperial pool of freedmen, which also allowed the equites to rise up into position here. So as Victor had alluded to in his introduction about Roman society, the equites were elites also in their own right, because they were the merchants, the tax collectors, and such. They were I would even say quite a lot of them were even richer than most patricians. So to keep a check on their power, they were not allowed to have these provincial administrative posts. Now they get this, which does open a pool for probably more talented administrators to even come through. Now, Suetonius is undoubtedly very biased against Vitellius because his father fought for Otho in the first Battle of Bedriacum. So surprise, surprise. And he gave an unfavorable account of Vitellius' brief administration. He describes him as an unambitious and showed indications of a desire to govern wisely, but that balance and Caesarea encouraged him to, in a course of vicious excessness, which threw his better qualities into the background. He's even reported to have starved his own mother to fulfill a prophecy by the Chatan seers that he would rule longer if his mother died first.
Oh my God. Okay.
Though there's another version where it is said that his mom asked for poison to commit suicide so that she can sacrifice herself for her son, I suppose, which he approved. And Suetonius also says his best traits were the sins of luxury and cruelty. Now, Suetonius is the harshest critic, and Tacitus and Cassius Dio, future historians also, they kind of don't fully agree with Suetonius, but they also never have anything really kind to say about this man. So I think the general narrative can hold true. And there is one thing which did say that he was a one second. I did read it about his seers.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it, without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software, and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
Yeah, and also one more thing, he was actually an equestrian. He was not a patrician. Sorry, I forgot to mention that as well.
Vitellius.
Yeah, his father was from the equestrian class. And so he was the first man that took the imperial purple, with not being from the senatorial elite. And yes, what it was said is, Suetonius, that when Vitellius was born, his horoscope was so horrified that his father tried to prevent him from becoming a consul. Now, it's not really mentioned by our primary sources, or if it was mentioned, it's been lost what this that horoscope is. And I think one of the most famous feasts that Vitellius gives is quite an extensive feast for his brother, which, according to Suetonius, these are the words, and I quote, at which it is said there was served up no less than 2,000 choice fishes and 7,000 birds. Yet even this supper he himself outdid at a feast which he gave upon his first use of a dish which had been made for him, and which, for its extraordinary size, he called the Shield of Minerva. That must have been some kind of dish.
He knew
In
how to
this
throw a
dish-
party, and I think
Yeah.
he knew how to make friends. He made friends with the Rhine legionaries, and but he didn't seem to use this on the key players though. So.
Yeah.
This is
And there's a
totally left
description.
field, but
And this,
if either of
yeah.
you watched an old show, Stargate SG-1, there was a character based off of him. But anyways, I desist. But I clearly remember this character.
And there's actually a continued description of this dish. In this dish, there was tossed up together the livers of pike, the brains of pheasants and peacocks, with the tongues of flamingos and the entrails of lampreys, which had been brought in from ships as far as from Parthia and the Spanish Straits. On the description, it is not at all appetizing. I don't know about you guys.
Very exotic
you-
choice.
You're just not cultured, man.
And another, now, but as Vic said, he knew to make friends and throw parties, but who's going to fund this? This is where Vitellius starts to lose a lot of support. So one noted gourmet of that time, Marcus Gavius Appius, named after the emperor a less exotic dish of peas and broad beans mashed with sweet and sour ingredients. And Edward Gibbon, a English historian, actually said, a footnote that Vitellius consumed about 6 million sesterces of food, of money in 7 months. Tacitus fairly calls him a hog, but it is by substituting for a coarse word with a very fine image.
What can I say? My man was bulking.
I don't know if that would be bulking. So, with this situation and him not having fully gained the support of the Pannonian and Danubian legions, we do have our fourth emperor entering the field. And this is Titus Vespasian. Now, he was considered one of the best generals at this time in the reign of Emperor Nero. Second best until the year 67 AD, because Nero was fearing a certain general, Corbulo. Greg, do you have a few words about General Corbulo that you would like to add?
Here, 1 second. I want to bring up also a picture. Okay, I just got to go through my pictures again. There he is. Oh, there we go. So here's a bust of him. So Cneius Domitius Corbulo was a prominent Roman general, obviously, and a politician, of course, as they all were. During this time period, first AD, he was known for military prowess and successful campaigns in the eastern provinces. He was born in 10 AD, and he quickly rose through the ranks, becoming a senator and earning a reputation for having good leadership skills. His career really would take off when he was appointed governor of Armenia around 58 AD, during a time when there was conflict between Rome and Parthia, which there always is. Corbulo demonstrated strategic brilliance in his role, successfully re-establishing Roman dominance in the region through a combination of military strength and diplomacy. His tactics involved fortifying key locations and using effective supply lines, which enabled his forces to outmaneuver the Parthians. His success would lead to further promotions and further responsibilities, including the governorship of Cappadocia, and the command of the Eastern legions. He would continue to confront the Parthians, particularly during the reign of our dear friend Emperor Nero. His military campaign saw significant victories, such as the capture of the Parthian capital, Stiseption. It's a little hard to say that one. But he also faced challenges due to, the changing political dynamics of Rome at this time, which is an understatement. By 67, tensions with Nero were escalating, to say the least. And, Corbulo was recalled to Rome, where he was accused of treason. And he was actually going to face execution, but something would happen later on. I don't want to give any more about him. so,
No, you can talk about his death. Fine.
so, yeah, he actually chose to take his own life. And his legacy is marked, with his victories, his prowess militarily, and his contributions to Rome. I'd say it was pretty sad fate for him.
And it's actually kind of sad because he was ordered to fall on his sword by Nero, and he was actually one guy who was completely loyal to the throne.
You'd have to be to
That
follow
he-
Nero, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. And he carried it out with the exclamation Axios, which means I am worthy.
Mhm.
Now, how does this play into our story for our fourth emperor, Vespasian? Is after Corbulo, Vespasian was considered the best general in the empire. He had an extensive military career where he served in the invasion of Britain. He was a legate at that time, commanding one of the 4 legions. And this was in 66 AD. He was appointed to go to Judea as the Jews in the region had revolted against the Roman rule. And it was a bit of a mess for the Romans at that time because there was the governor of Syria had been defeated in the battle, which literally just opened it and I forgot, was the Battle of Bedriacum, which 20,000 troops of the 12th Legion Fulminata were engaging many thousands of Jewish rebels. Yep, this is the same legion in Rick Riordan's Roman series. And they suffered even the horrific dishonor of losing the Aquila. So it's definitely a situation that demands a very competent general to go. He's assigned 2 legions initially and moves there, where he also befriends a very famous Jewish resistance leader, Flavius Josephus, who would later write about him. And despite being a Jew, Josephus was not particularly fond of the Romans, but he did have a pretty high opinion of Vespasian, who as a fair and humble official. Whereas another Roman, Herod Agrippa II, he just kind of goes to town demonizing him. So it's quite a stark contrast, but it does give an indication of how Vespasian is remembered by people he's fighting against, if they at least call him a fair official. And he gets a 3rd legion when his elder son Titus comes. So he does have a force of now 3 legions, 8 cavalry squadrons, and 10 auxiliary cohorts, which by strength is approximately another legion, but they're just not considered legionaries. He's not really been involved politically with what has been going on in the last days of Emperor Nero and the year of the 4th emperor. But a few weeks after each event has passed, no doubt they get the information of what is going on. Keep in mind, travel is quite slow. And what Vespasian and Titus decided to do was initially to send Titus to meet with Galba, kind of like soothe over and proclaim their loyalty to the new emperor. But just as Titus was actually about to leave for Rome, he gets the news of Galba's murder. and Otho has been declared emperor, and Vitellius is marching. They don't know about like Vitellius's eventual victory over Otho yet, but Titus wisely decides that it's probably best I don't go to Rome right now. And this now what works brilliantly for Vespasian in this is that he is a decorated general, and the governor of Syria and the prefects of Alexandria want him to take the throne because the eastern half of the Roman Empire is not in favor of Vitellius. And they decide to consider their options. And Vespasian decided to use propaganda in a way to kind of say it's time for him to take the throne. Because according to Suetonius, a prophecy in the eastern provinces claimed that from Judea would come the future rulers of the world. And Vespasian just kind of used this as his divine intervention to say that, yeah, this is how I'm going to, this is meant for me. That's why I'm destined to rule Rome. Turns out quite well. Fun fact, even Scipio Africanus used this prophecy for the siege of Carthago Nova, where he said Neptune will show him the way, which was where the tide on the estuary went down. And his men actually believed that the gods have spoken to the general, when he just got this information from a fisherman. Now, they decided in February of 69, so this is during the reign of Otho, that they will challenge, but they will move later in the year. And he starts to rally support from the eastern legions. One of his biggest supporters is Gaius Mucianus, who was the governor of Syria and the commander of 3 legions as well. This is now making sure he has 6 legions at his disposal, plus their auxiliaries. And in addition to this governor, this man is also friends with many senatorial elites in Rome. This is going to help legitimize himself with the senatorial class. And, these men would also be favorable to Vespasian because they all hold generals in good accord, and Vespasian was considered the best after Corbulo. And in May 69, Mucianus formally implored Vespasian to now challenge for the imperial throne, and in July he does, proclaim himself as emperor. And the prefect at Alexandria in Egypt, which is the only province in Rome where you don't have a governor, you have a prefect appointed by the emperor. The 2 legions there in the breadbasket of Rome declare their loyalty to Vespasian. So he now has 8 to 9 legions under his command who have openly declared for him. So this is approximately a third of the Roman fighting forces. And right now he moves, and Vespasian does not move to Rome at this time. He actually goes to Egypt and hauls the grain shipments to Rome. Now, party boy Vitellius, he's not getting this grain. The grain is subsidized, and it's a big way to keep the Romans happy. This starts causing resentment. Now, Vitellius does have a powerful force, as we said, of the veteran legions of Gaul and the Rhineland. But the Spanish and North African, those 2 legions are not involved in this, and neither the legions in Britain. And the greatest boost Vespasian does gain is the armies in the Danube and the Balkans. That is, the armies of Moesia, Pannonia, and Illyricum soon declare for him. So now he has complete control of half of the Roman realm. Now, while his grain supply is there, from northeast Italy, the Pannonian legions who had initially wanted to march and fight for Emperor Otho now enter Rome from the northeast, and they are led by Marcus Antonius Primus. Greg, do you have anything you would like to add about Primus? He's going to be quite an important player here.
Yeah, here I'm just gonna find a picture. There he is. So here is his bust. There we go. Marcus Antonius Primus, obviously, is a notable figure given the history he's living in. He gained prominence during the Civil War between. Yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to go through these notes. Actually, I've very
Okay,
little in reference to what we're talking about. You might want to continue talking about him if you know a bit
sure.
more about him.
So he's actually one of those people that descended from the Gauls after the Gallic conquest of Caesar. No doubt, obviously, from chieftain families as well. So it's sort of like a Vindex in his journey. And at this moment in time, he is a legate. So it's quite an honor for him to command so many Roman forces. And he was actually nicknamed Becus, which means beaky due to his physique, which is supposed to, like, as a bust, he had a rooster's beak like mouth. And during the reign of Nero, he was a member of the Senate. And he was kind of banished because of something of Nero, like in one of the many conspiracies. But Galba reinstated. And he was placed in command of Legio 7 Galbina and Pannonia. And he initially and the other legions in the region wanted to support Otho, since Otho was anyways a loyalist and they had little love for Vitellius. He is going to be one of the key supporters and declares for Vespasian. So, as he said, Vespasian is in Egypt right now. He is halting the shipment. And Marcus Antonius is marching to defeat the Vitellian forces. And coincidentally, at the same place where Vitellius and Otho clash, we have the second battle of Bedriacum, where the legions of Vespasian and the legions of Vitellius clash. And this is, by the number of legions involved, a much larger engagement. Both sides have deployed at least 5 legions to the battle, which gives them an effective legionary strike fighting force of over 25,000 men. We don't know how many cavalry, but considering the standard Roman deployment, you can also assume there would be about 25,000 auxiliary infantry as well, supplementing these ranks. Now, before the Eastern legions, that is the Syrian and Judean legions, are also marching to join up with the Danubian legions, but they will take much more time to come in. So the Danubian legions move in, and they are ready for their way to try to beat Vitalius since they were denied that opportunity. And they also move in. So when Vitalius heard of Marcus Antonius's approach, he dispatches Aulus Caesinia Aelianus, one of his trusted subordinates and legates, to confront the army. And if we believe Suetonius, he was the guy that kind of pushed Vitalius to indulge in his great excesses, as I would say. And this force, right? So the forces of Vitalius comprise of the 21st Rapax Legion, the 5th Aladue Legion, Legio 1 Italica, Legio 22 Primigenia, and Legio 4 Macedonica, which the 4th was supposed to be like Vitellius's personal legion as well. The forces that will be declaring and fighting for Vespasian here are Legio 3 Gallica, Legio 8 Augusta, Legio 7 Claudia, Legio 7 Galbina, and Legio 13 Gemina. Yeah, I know I said Legio 7 twice, and it's kind of like a weird quirk of the Romans that sometimes you would have different legions of the same number existing in different theaters.
Like Gemina means twin in Latin, so I suppose it was a twin legion.
But that was when that is used when the legions, those detachments are actually combined. So it's talking about the previous
Oh.
history of the units. So it's
Oh,
not
so
when they
it
are
was two
separate.
legions that they merged together, and so these are the
Then
twins.
it becomes a Gemina.
Oh, I see.
But what these are literally just two seventh legions that just somehow existed in the early empire. And funny enough, there were like six first legions at any point in the first early empire's history. So it's a bit confusing, I admit. Now, when the legions Vespasian's legions arrived at Verona, and though urged to attack before the rest of the army arrived, Caesinia decided to do so because it seems that Caesinia, Vitellius' big supporter, had enough of Vitalius and wanted him out. This is really Game of Thrones-ish, Rick.
Yeah, I was gonna say it has like the feeling of the War of Roses almost. And the short amount of time period, I was gonna ask, for the average person who lives in Rome, do they have any idea what's going on anymore with all of this?
No, probably not, because how do news travel in this
Exactly.
time period? It's a man on a horse is the fastest mode of transport.
But that was
So
too
you would
big.
have
That was big.
you would have
across the breadth of
people
the empire.
you would have people living in remote regions still thinking Nero is the emperor, like
Yeah.
even after Vespasian is emperor.
So years after some of these events, would there be people in the countryside who just get an update of how many emperors they had in the previous
So
like 2 years?
the best way the public at large, right, were made aware of a new emperor was coinage. So a lot of these guys, when they take over the throne, they will mint out coins that were, in their image. So this is how people.
Imagine
So
a merchant using like one of Galba's coins and is trying to buy something from someone who hasn't even heard about this. Like, oh, you made that emperor up.
Yeah, seriously.
I think I'll just share one little image first. So this is just like the coins that all the four emperors did mint. So we have, I believe this would be Galba, if I remember that bust correctly. This would have most likely been Otho. Now, Vespasian also, I know, was not in like as,
Yeah.
I would say this is, I think this would be Vitalius and this is going to be Vespasian.
Is it possible all four of these coinages would be in circulation at the same time?
They would be, because it's not easy to just get rid of currency so much.
That
You
would
just
be
be
interesting.
using it.
All right, I desist. It's pretty funny though.
It is, but this is really the way everyone knew. Which, fun fact, during the crisis of the 3rd century, when Aurelian was emperor, one of the key cities that the Palmyrean Empire took over was actually the city of Antioch. And that was predominantly for the imperial mint that was there. So it was for that particular asset that city was taken. Now, in the battle, as I said, Aulus Aelianus and Sextus Lucius Bacchus, the commander of the Roman fleet at Ravenna, were actually planning to defect from Vitellius and join Vespasian. And his troops refused to follow this lead and just put him in chains. And Valens, the other senior legate of Vitellius' armies, had set out from Rome, but he was quite a while behind, several days behind. So for now, the army of Vitalius is now without their generals and they advance on the city of Cremona. Now, Marcus Antonius Primus and his men are at Bedriacum and advance towards Cremona with a force of cavalry. And there is a clash between the vanguard of Vitalius' forces and the vanguard forces between the cities of Bedriacum and Cremona on the 24th of August in the year 69. And it ends with Marcus Antonius sending back to Bedriacum for the legions. So the Antonius' legionaries, they do have the better of the fighting. not massive casualties, unlike the first battle, which was a bloodbath. And the Vitalian troops do retreat to their camp outside Cremona at the end of the day. Now, Antonius's forces advance along the Via Postuma towards Cremona, which is where the enemy army is based. And now the Vitalian army has also been reinforced with 2 more legions. But the general has still not yet arrived. Valens has still not arrived. This is critical. They have no high command. But so in the darkness, Antonius does also suffer pretty heavy casualties, and for a while, in the fighting the Legio 7 Galbina, which was his legion, he lost its Aquila for a bit, but a centurion sacrificed his own life to win it back. And the turning point comes at dawn. Now, the Third Legion, Gallica, had served in Syria for many years before being redeployed to the Danubian frontier. They had adopted the local custom of saluting the sun as it rose with, loud cheers. So as they see, and these men are also encamped, if you were to see, on the road on the eastern side of it, on the Via Postuma. So as they are cheering the saluting sun, which is the custom, the Vitalian forces misinterpret this. They think that more enemy legions have come to reinforce the Vespasian forces. And that's why they are, looking east and greeting with such, loud cheers and celebrations. And they kind of lost hearts. And they were driven back to their camp and taken by Antonius's forces. And Cremona also was sacked and burned for 4 days by the Vespasian forces, with quite a lot of atrocities of, people getting raped, murdered, and robbed. And Antonius was kind of humiliated a bit by this, because he did not also sanction this much of brutality, that he forbade his men from keeping any people captured in Cremona as slaves. The age-old thing that the Romans never want to, embarrass other Romans or the Italians, as they would call it. So his men just did a workaround around this. They just murdered everyone to avoid the punishment. Well,
That's a hell of a workaround.
Well, it's kind of similar to when Emperor Aurelian takes one city, I can't remember, in Asia Minor. And before they had divided. Yes, Tiana. Thank you so much. When they portrayed defiance, he said, I'm not going to even let a single dog live in that city. And when his army comes and before any fighting, they fully surrender. So he can't sack the city, but he promises men they could. But he just says, well, I promise no dog will live.
Kill all the dogs then, huh?
Yep. Now, this is not the full end of the war after the Second Battle of Bedriacum, but it was the death blow for Vitellius's bid for the throne. Now, it was around this time that Vespasian would also start receiving, sending grain supplies to Rome. But when Antonius's forces marched into Rome, there was pretty brutal street fighting between Vitalius's citizens and the remaining supporters of Vitalius, which led to quite savage street fighting in the Eternal City itself. So that was a very dark episode. And Vitalius makes a stand there, right? He distributes bribes and everything, and levies nearby tribes, such as the Batavians, but the Batavians, at least this time, refused. And, before the sack even took place, he actually sent an emissary by the Vestal Virgins to kind of negotiate a truce. They will not be attacked since the Vestal Virgins are held in high regard by almost every Roman. with the enemies at the gate, his people did put up a savage street fight as Antonius's soldiers marched in. So it was the Vitellians that actually started the street fighting, attacking from the roofs and everything, which then forced the Vespasian forces to fight back quite hard. And Vitellius goes into hiding and prepares to flee, but he decides that he needs to have one last look at the palace. And that is when Vespasian's men caught him and killed him in the streets.
Oh, I thought it was lynched by the citizens.
No, it was seems to be the soldiers that catch. Because the parties were definitely, so this is just like some images of various civil wars. And this is like the death. So as you can see, there are soldiers here that are killing the glutton of Germania, as I'll call him.
I was gonna say, I'm surprised they didn't put him over a roast.
I don't think the Romans were that desperate yet for cannibalism or such extreme practices.
I don't know.
That's usually
Cutting off the grain from Egypt was actually a really good choice. That was definitely going to screw up the citizenry.
Indeed. And I think this is just a map which just shows which areas were loyal at one point or the other to each emperor. So this is just showing how the division that existed. But this marked the end of Vitalius's bid. And on 21st December, the year 69, Vespasian was acknowledged as emperor. And he was the founder of the Flavian dynasty that would rule for about 25, 30 years. It's a short-lived dynasty, but it is the first non-Julio-Claudian dynasty that succeeded. And Vespasian as an emperor, I think he brought stability. He still had to complete and conclude the Roman-Judean war. He would also be facing the Batavian revolt and had to also rebuild a lot of destruction, but pretty sound policies, even though there were supposedly many conspiracies against the Flavian emperor. And one of his most famous taxes was the urine tax that he put in place. I think, Craig, you are like, what the hell did I just say?
So just explain this one.
So, I'm kind of scared because I'm wondering if government leaders will now just find new ways to tax us. But he imposed a tax on the distribution of urine from public urinals. So the reason was a lot of the Romans knew about ammonia that is there in urine, and they had chemical compounds to extract it.
Yeah, of course.
And the ammonia was used for cleaning and other purposes. So many stores in Rome, just outside them, they would have like this kind of box where people could just go and take a piss. And this was like a free way for them to kind of get a supply of ammonia.
Huh.
So this is so on this, Vespasian puts a tax.
Bold strategy.
Now,
money doesn't smell.
Yeah, so his son, Titus, complained about this disgusting nature. And Vespasian is said to have, according to Suetonius, he holds up a gold coin and asks whether he felt offended by its smell. When Titus says no, that is, he's going to be the next emperor. Vespasian replied, yet it comes from urine. And there is that Latin saying, pecunia non olet, which is translated to money does not stink, as Victor said.
Fair enough.
But this marks the end of the year of the four emperors. This was the first civil war in almost 100 years of Roman history, which was a break from the previous 100 years of civil wars.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Civil unrest.
And then there would be no more civil wars after this one.
No problems after this. Yeah.
For about 130 odd years. But Rome would, starting with the build-up of the Flavian dynasty, build up to its apex. We would have the Flavian dynasty. We would have the 5 good emperors and Commodus. Yes, Commodus actually reigned for like a decade or so, not like 6 months as portrayed in Gladiator.
Yeah, but you have to give Gladiator the benefit of the doubt. I mean, really, Scott was trying to make it more dramatic and stuff. I know why
True enough,
I know why he did that.
true enough, but I'm
Yeah.
just stating. Or
Yeah.
also, I just add this one thing about Gladiator. The sister was actually involved in a plot to kill Commodus into his reign, and he
Of course.
has her exiled, and she dies there.
Yeah, of course.
But that
Yes.
is actually a legit threat. But she died way before him in reality.
So you mean like Gladiator 2, it's not real?
What? Uh,
I'm just so scared to watch the movie just because how much I love the first movie. It's an amazing movie,
Oh,
especially the
yes.
ending. But
This-
I'm just so terrified to watch Gladiator because I think like maybe I haven't watched the movie, I'll fully admit, but I'm just terrified to watch it because it might tarnish my view of how Gladiator 1
If-
was.
if you watch it and imagine this is like a different planet and this isn't the Roman Empire, it's kind of good, but
yes.
like it's off the rocker. I mean, Denzel Washington is basically not even pretending he's Roman. He's just like a gangster in it, and he's
Yeah.
the best performance, but it's all over the place.
All right. Well, I guess Craig, Victor, thank you for being hostage to me. I think, Craig, you enjoyed the role reversal
The-
from our previous series of the Malaysian Singapore campaign where I played the hostage role.
And before we let the audience go, I got a few things I wanted to say. Of course, again, if you want to support the channel, please, if you can, check out the YouTube membership. I would love to boost those numbers over the Patreon because everybody is going to the Patreon. I think it's because I always say www.patreon.com/specific channel. But both you have like identical benefits. It's the identical price. But on YouTube, I have a lot of unlisted content that you don't find on the Patreon. So there's a little bonus there. But if you join either, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, about 20 plus episodes at this point. You get early access to all the content I make. And at this point, the Battle for the Great Wall of China is going to be there for like a month solid, as well as a very weird episode where I look into the world of Chinese World War II dramas. And it's different. It's going to be very different, to say the least. And of course, if you join, you get voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. Gaurav, you kind of alluded to this, so I'll just say it here. We're going to do a Taiping Rebellion series, because a lot of the listeners probably listen to my other podcast for Kings and Generals. It's not going to be just copy paste what I did over there, which was 12 episodes long, mind you. I'm going to try and add some new things that I've learned about it because I've read about 7 books in the Taiping Rebellion at this point. It's very bizarre, very long tail, and you can look at it from a religious point of view, from a Civil War point of view, from a Marxist point of view. I'll talk about how Karl Marx actually got most of his motivations from the event. He was following it. He was a news reporter at the time. Whatever that means, that's a weird story. But I also have recently, I don't know if I can give it away. I've written a piece that I asked the bosses at Kings and Generals to put out soon. I don't know when it'll come out, but I would love to do a podcast talking about a war plan the United States had created in the 1930s to invade Canada. I think it would be very humorous to go over how they did reconnaissance, how a very famous American aviator flew over Canada, and he was the first person to say, yeah, we should use poison gas on them to take Halifax. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of fun in that one, and that'll be coming soon, I hope. But yeah, Victor, thanks for also pitching into this one. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
And until next time.